Irrational Games, the studio that developed BioShock, managed to create one of the best antagonists in gaming history, Andrew Ryan. 2K Marine, studio tasked with the development of BioShock 2, had big boots to fill in a relatively short time. 2K Marine gave us Dr.Sofia Lamb, a character that is ruthless and cold. She is deeply devoted to her beliefs, even willing to sacrifice her own daughter for her ideals. She also has a very condescending voice that is very hateable.
But take heart. Out of your pain, paradise was born.
Being a collectivist, her beliefs are the polar opposite of Andrew Ryan's. She believes that one ought to put the greater good, the benefit of the society, ahead of personal gain or selfish desires. I maintain that Andrew Ryan was a better antagonist when it comes to comparing the two. That in no way means Dr.Sofia Lamb is a bad character. She is a very good character and an apt antagonist for BioShock 2. In this video, I will explain her backstory, her beginnings in Rapture, her rise in popularity, her role in Rapture, and her downfall. Along the way, I will shed light on her ideology. It is worth mentioning that this video will contain spoilers, so beware. Sofia Lamb was a psychiatrist, an incredible one. She graduated from Oxford University and went on to live in Japan. She lived in Hiroshima at the time of the bombing. Though she herself survived the bombing, she witnessed many of her friends die. She lost faith in the world, seeing that the USA was using the greater good argument to justify the bombing. Dr. Lamb was raised by her father, who was a physician. She was heavily influenced by him. Her collectivist ideology stems from his views. Rapture, the great city built underwater, started facing a problem. A fair chunk of people were starting to miss the surface. They were feeling blue. Andrew Ryan tried avoiding the problem at first, but increasing reports of depression and people struggling led to him inviting Dr. Lamb to Rapture. Bill McDonough, one of Andrew Ryan's closest friends, played a significant role in convincing Andrew Ryan to invite Dr. Lamb. Andrew Ryan was a paranoid and controlling individual, and Dr. Lamb, on the other hand, was pretty vocal about her views. He would never have invited her, knowing that she could prove to be a problem in the future. Maybe he thought of her as a tool he could exploit to win back the people who were feeling isolated and lost. The purpose of Dr. Lamb's arrival was simple: lift the spirits of people. But she started growing immensely popular. Offering therapy and free counseling sessions, she started preaching her collectivist views. Her ideology presented a lot of what people were not allowed to have under Ryan's regime: faith, religion, a sort of a feeling of a group or community.
Andrew Ryan left us wandering, confused and alone amongst yesterday's wreckage. But Sofia Lamb shows us that we are not alone. We are together as a family. So when you see a man brought to his knees, recognize that he is your brother and pull him up. Sofia Lamb teaches us what is in common is good. What is irreducible is right.
She really was remarkably intelligent and a very capable manipulator. She knew exactly what to target in emotionally vulnerable and isolated people. An example of this is Grace Holloway, along with many others such as Father Wales. Grace Holloway protested against Andrew Ryan by singing songs against him. Andrew Ryan did not react kindly to this and blacklisted her. She was forced into poverty. She attended free counseling sessions of Dr. Lamb, and Dr. Lamb's initiative made her think she cares about people.
My folks lived in the St. Louis Hooverville in 32, and the drop is worse by a mile. Nobody's supposed to live down here. City pissing on us. Never tried. Ryan doesn't care, and Fontaine's a damn crook. But Dr. Lamb cares. We're still people to her. She's offering free mental counseling on Sundays. When I go, I get the feeling she's got a plan for Rapture. And for me.
Dr. Lamb also used to deliberately lose money in poker games in order to distribute wealth. She continued gradually pushing people towards her views, and began actively encouraging them to stand up against Andrew Ryan. Popper's Drop, the biggest slum of Rapture, soon became Dr. Lamb's stronghold. Andrew Ryan started seeing her as a threat, and this led to a series of public debates between him and Dr. Lamb. He hoped to expose her to the people, but this strategy massively backfired. Dr. Lamb's popularity reached a new height as a result of these public debates.
Religious rights Doctor. You're free to kneel before whatever tribal fetish you favor in the comfort of your own home. But in Rapture, liberty is our only law. A man's only duty is to himself. To imply otherwise, therefore, is criminal.
Ask yourself, Andrew, what is your great chain of progress but a faith? The chain is a symbol for an irrational force guiding us towards ascension. No less mystic than the crucifixes you seize and burn.
Her followers soon also began a religion revolved around her views. Her book Unity and Metamorphosis was treated as a sacred text. Lamb by this point was not a mere psychiatrist. Her popularity became overwhelming. She was a force to be reckoned with. Andrew Ryan needed to take action, and he needed to take action quickly.
Lamb is becoming a problem. The woman is a damned collectivist. Here in Rapture, how could the council fail to see it? Worse, to hide her intent, she gulls these patients of hers into a religious frenzy. A new Kremlin will rise and swallow the council house before they realize they've been had. I will not have my city swindled by the parasite. Whatever its guise, it is time, I think, to call Sinclair.
He planted Stanley Pole as a mole in her operations to take her down using the services of Mr. Augustus Sinclair. Using Stanley Pole, Andrew Ryan gathered enough dirt on Dr. Lamb to lock her up in Persephone.
At last, we have our Judas. One of my own people has been feeding Ryan evidence of my activities, and now I am to be detained.
Persephone was a detention facility owned by Sinclair. Worked as a prison against the people who were a threat to Andrew Ryan's Rapture. Sometime after her arrival in Rapture, Dr. Lamb gave birth to Eleanor. Her involvement in Eleanor's birth was minimal, as she puts it. They did not have a mother-daughter relationship with one another. Eleanor was more of a test subject than a daughter to Dr. Lamb. She saw Eleanor as someone who she could pass the torch to when the timing was right, to carry on her motives. Dr. Lamb from her very birth was actively working to suppress her individuality, so she could be raised as a tool to carry on her ideals. She was taught philosophy and psychology to instill Lamb's views in her. She was not even allowed to engage with other children. Despite her best efforts, Eleanor had free will from a very young age, and was a fairly rebellious child, who still managed to engage with other children.
In ethical psychiatry, we must account for...
Eleanor Lamb speaking. Mum says I'm not to play with the other children because they're being raised on a diet of dog-eat-dog. I wanted to see these dog-eaters, so I waited until Mum was gone and went out to find one. And guess what? The dog-eaters wear human skins. It makes them look just like us.
When Dr. Lamb was arrested, she entrusted Grace Holloway with the protection of Eleanor. This particular move shows the sly nature of Dr. Lamb, and also showcases her intelligence. She knew that Grace Holloway could not bear children, and she knew how much children meant to Grace Holloway. This move ensured both the loyalty of Grace Holloway and protection of Eleanor.
I know it's wrong to feel so fine right now, but I can't seem to quit this grin. Dr. Lamb came to tell me that Ryan's finally gonna lock her up. It's gonna gut the believers, and I should feel the same. But Sophia remembered that I was barren, and she asked me to take care of her baby while she's gone. Baby Eleanor Lamb. Gorgeous, clever little girl. I have a child now, and it's gonna put the whole world all right.
In Dr. Lamb's absence, Stanley Pole tried his best to destroy her operations, throwing crazy parties and spending money. Eleanor soon came to know the true nature of Stanley Pole and his role in the imprisonment of her mother. In order to save himself, Stanley admitted Eleanor to the little sister's orphanage. where she was bonded to a Big Daddy belonging to the Alpha series of Big Daddies and became a little sister. The name of the Big Daddy? Subject Delta, the protagonist of BioShock 2. This whole procedure was completed by Gil Alexander, a brilliant scientist who will be discussed in detail a little later. Persephone was supposed to be a low point for Dr. Lamb. Sinclair made Dr. Lamb work as a therapist in order to make the other inmates a little more timid. Dr. Lamb used this opportunity to spread her family. Soon, inmates and even wardens were heavily influenced by her. Persephone, which belonged to Sinclair, now belonged to Dr. Lamb. After breaking free and learning that her daughter Eleanor was now a little sister, she planned her abduction from Subject Delta on New Year's Eve. She took her daughter back from Subject Delta, hypnotized him, and made him shoot himself. He fell into a coma. Civil war was now in full flow in Rapture between Fontaine and Andrew Ryan. Lamb took refuge in Persephone. Soon Dr. Lamb met Gil Alexander of Fontaine Futuristics. Dr. Lamb's views and her character appealed massively to Gil Alexander. He became a staunch follower of her and joined the family. Dr. Lamb worked with Gil Alexander to undo the psychological conditioning of Eleanor, and they were eventually successful. Dr. Lamb wanted to create the first utopian, someone devoid of personal will who could live for the greater good, someone who could hold all the memories of the brilliant minds of Rapture, become Rapture themselves. She convinced Gil Alexander to take the fall.
Sophia believes the perfect human altruist is just a formula, waiting on us to solve for X. Intelligence and consciousness are not the same, she argued. Awareness of self naturally becomes obsession with it. So, if we could suppress my sense of self, but imbue me with the cognitive capacity to serve the common welfare, we could thereby generate the first utopian. And then, Sophia said, at long last, utopia would follow.
Adam was used for the purpose of storing the memories. As a result of this experiment, Gil Alexander was exposed to dangerous amounts of Adam. Excessive abuse of Adam drove him mad. This can be seen when you play BioShock 2, as he refers to himself as Alex the Great and behaves in an erratic manner. Quite an entertaining character, but a horrible, horrible fate. Dr. Lamb found that as Eleanor had spent time as a little sister, she would be relatively safe from the adverse effects of Adam. Eleanor was now being raised to be the first utopian.
Through Adam, Eleanor will become the daughter of the people, a true utopian, brilliant beyond measure, but utterly selfless. As she ascends, Delta, you and I will seem as dogs, circling and snarling amid the afterbirth.
Adam was fed to her while she was in a sedated state by Dr. Lamb. By this time, Andrew Ryan and Fontaine were both dead. The remnants of Rapture were completely under her control. Her family was in power. Splicers blindly followed her instructions. Lamb needed a lot of Adam for the Utopian project. She started kidnapping little girls from the surface and turning them into little sisters.
But now, all around the world, children vanish by the sea, kidnapped. And so I return, in fear of what I already know. Someone is making new little ones.
Mother Goose, Dr. Tenenbaum, returned to Rapture due to the mysterious abductions of little girls. She rightfully suspected someone was turning little girls into little sisters again. Eleanor, despite her mother's attempts to raise her as her puppet, was fairly rebellious. Dr. Lamb tried her best to suppress free will in Eleanor, but to no avail. Eleanor was being raised as a test subject. She craved freedom. She was seriously being abused by her mother. She desperately needed help. The year is now 1968. Dr. Lamb's project of the first utopian is progressing quite well. Eleanor is being subjected to heavy Adam abuse. To get the help she needs, she turns to her paired father, Subject Delta. She manages to revive him and wake him up from his coma. At this point, the events of BioShock 2 begin. Because of the nature of their bond, Subject Delta also must find Eleanor in order to save himself. On the other hand, Eleanor desperately needs help. Throughout the events of BioShock 2, Dr. Lamb tries her best to stop Delta. But the power of friendship prevails, and Subject Delta reaches Persephone after dealing with some of her closest followers, including Grace Holloway, Father Wales, and even Gil Alexander, or what's left of him. Subject Delta was actively helped in his quest by Dr. Tenenbaum and Sinclair, and also Eleanor wherever she could. Subject Delta and Persephone comes face to face with Dr. Lamb. Dr. Lamb, knowing the nature of the bond between Eleanor and Delta, pulls out the ultimate maneuver. She stops the heart of her own daughter with her own hands. Delta falls into a coma. He is trapped by Dr. Lamb and completely helpless. Well, he is once again helped by Eleanor, who manages to resurrect him with the help of Little Sisters. The only way to escape Rapture is through the lifeboat of Sinclair. Realizing her defeat and seeing that she failed to suppress the individuality in Eleanor, Dr. Lamb takes refuge in Sinclair's lifeboat and blows up Persephone. Lamb does make the final offer of allowing Eleanor to come with her. She refuses, of course. Soon everything blows up. Eleanor and Subject Delta barely manage to escape by the scruff of their necks. Dr. Lamb here can be seen drowning. Her fate depends on the player's choice to either harvest or save Little Sisters, and to spare or kill some side characters that appear in BioShock 2. It is actually Eleanor who either shows mercy to Dr. Lamb or lets her die. Eleanor is influenced by Subject Delta's decisions, so in a way Subject Delta gets to shape the personality of Eleanor Lamb. In the end, despite Dr. Lamb's best attempts, Eleanor rejected the life her mother claimed was predestined for her. She chose to carve her own path and fight for her freedom. In the end, she managed to win freedom. What happens to Sofia Lamb in case she survives is not explained at the end of the game. That's all, folks. That was the story of Dr. Sofia Lamb. I hope I did not waste your time. I hope you enjoyed it, and goodbye.